call the meeting to order. First item is roll call. Present, myself, Fire Chair, Trustee Eugene Dugan.
Leah Hayes, Police Trustee.
Walt Berry, Trustee.
Harvey Lewis, Trustee.
Bob Klausner, Counsel.
Greg Williams, Staff.
William Johnston, Staff.
Cole Jacobs, WTW.
Sue Wang, Acting Finance Director.
And if everyone who's zooming in could state their name for the record, please.
Joe Griffin, Foster.
Barbara Boyd, Purvis Gray.
Tiffany Manville, Purvis Gray.
Ronald Pinkston.
Thank you.
All right. We have agenda before us. Is there adoption to approve the agenda? As
Motion to adopt.
motion to adopt.
And I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the agenda is adopted. There's approval of the minutes. The minutes would be from August.
Issue correction. I think I was referred to as Mr. Ward.
Sorry, Harvey.
I think I was referred to as Mr. Ward.
Changed to Trustee.
You should be so lucky.
This is me too. That's
Okay. We can make that
One of
change.
those auto-correct things, I guess. I didn't notice that, but you would have.
I noticed Harvey was going for it.
Yeah, right.
Don't want to be confused.
That's the beauty of auto-correct, or auto-fill.
Does it need to?
So approval of the minutes with that change.
I'll second. Did you make a motion?
Yeah.
Okay, second.
All right, there's a motion to accept the minutes and waive the reading from August. And a second?
Second.
With
All
the
right.
change mentioned by Harvey Lewis.
With a change. Motion by Harvey Lewis. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. First item on the agenda is the auditor's report and financial statements. And who's this doing Purvis Gray?
Good morning. Most of the information we're going to communicate is actually in the letter, so we're going to start with the second tab. Again, for the record, I'm Barbara Boyd, partner with Purvis Gray & Company, and Tiffany Mangold is the director in charge of the audit. She's here as well. Basically, we're presenting the results of the fiscal year 21 audit. This letter, called Communications with Those Charged with Governance, is intended for you as the Board of Trustees. And it includes information that is helpful when you're reviewing the financial statements as well as evaluating the results of the audit. So starting in the significant audit matters there, the first section underneath it, the qualitative aspects of accounting. This is information that when you're reviewing your financial statements, it's helpful to keep in mind that there are judgments and estimates that impact the numbers and the note disclosures in those financial statements. So we disclose what those significant estimates and disclosures are. In the first bullet point there, one of the things that you see is a change in accounting policy this year. So management is responsible for selecting and using appropriate accounting policies. There are changes from time to time. There was one significant change this year, and it had to do with the consolidated plan's share of the pooled cash, of the city's pooled cash. So in the past, this was reported as cash and cash equivalents on your financial statements. And this is cash that's held by the city. It's used to pay your benefit payments and many other expenses of the pension plan. And this year, it's reported as a due from the city of Gainesville because That cash hasn't been deposited in the pension plan's trust fund. It's still in the name of the city. So moving down to the significant accounting estimates are actually on the second page. So one of the more impactful estimates on your financial statements is the fair value of financial instruments, right? The bulk of your investments are in equities that are publicly traded. Those investments are considered level one, not as sensitive an estimate. You have about between $60 and $70 million of other investments that are reported at net asset value. Those, that fair value is not as readily determinable, so that is a more significant estimate, and that's disclosed in your financial statements as well. And then the net pension asset that you have this year, that's a disclosure in your financial statements, is based on a number of actuarial assumptions and actuarial methods. Again, that number could change depending on whether those methods or actuarial assumptions change. One other item that I want to point out on this letter is under difficulties encountered in performing the audit. Obviously, we're here a little later than we would like to be, and that's because there were some delays in us getting started and us completing the audit. There's a number of issues just turned over in the key financial positions for the city, as well as the implementation of a new ERP system this year, and that was really the bulk of it. I do want to say, though, that this is not really a reflection on your team currently. We have thoroughly enjoyed working with your team and appreciate all the time and effort that they've put into getting us everything that we need for the audit. So that's it on this letter. Your financial statements are on the other tab. So just a couple of reports that we have included in these financial statements. The first report is at the beginning, pages 1 through 3. This is our independent auditor's report, and the most important paragraph that I always point out here is on the second page. It's just our opinion, and it basically says that your financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects, so it's a clean opinion and the highest level of assurance that we as auditors can provide. And then towards the back of the report, the last few pages, is another auditor's report on internal controls and compliance. And so as part of any audit, we look at your internal controls in order to help us determine where we're going to focus our time, right? It's part of our risk assessment. And through that process, if we identify any control deficiencies that we consider to be significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, we would communicate those to you. We did have one item that we consider to be a significant deficiency this year, and it's regarding your investment and pension activity reconciliations. Again, because of the turnover in the finance department and because of the implementation of the ERP system, the statements were not being reconciled to the general ledger on a monthly basis sometimes throughout the year. And so because the general ledger is used to create the financial statements, not having an accurate and correct GL would result in a material misstatement in your financial statements. Now, having said that, you did have an external consultant come in a few months after year end, review that information and make the corrections, so we actually didn't have any audit adjustments. The information was correct for us when we audited it, but not having those controls in place during the year is a risk. So our recommendation for that is basically that management reconcile the investment and pension activity on a monthly basis, and management has responded on the last couple of pages here on what their corrective action plan is for that item. So with that, that concludes my presentation. Again, I appreciate staff's time in preparing for the audit and getting us everything we need, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
This is the first time we've used First Grade for the independent audit.
I thought, excuse me, I thought First Grade had been doing our audits for a couple of years now. Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong?
Yes, since 2018.
Does anyone have any questions? No, there's no questions. Thank you.
So we would like, if the board is open to it, we'd like to have a motion to approve the draft report. That way we can submit it to the state and secure the, hopefully get the annual report approved before the fiscal year ends so that there are no delays or no further delays in receiving the fiscal year 21 premium tax distributions from the state.
According to the division, this is the only thing holding up,
Right.
like $2 million.
I'll make that motion, so.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion and a second to approve the independent audit and financial statements. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
So William, you have to upload this.
Yeah,
right,
I'll do that
through
this
their
morning.
form
Yeah,
thing.
through their website.
Okay.
Yep. And
Actually, we're
we'll,
just gonna-
because this is a draft version, we'll get a finalized version from the auditors, this week and
Right.
upload it this week.
And when will the 2022 begin, I guess, after October or
Right.
Have you engaged?
September 30? Yeah, oh, that's right.
Have you engaged Purvis Gray for the next fiscal year?
I'm not sure, Sue?
Yes.
Yes.
Usually it's
Yeah.
usually
The
5
FY
years.
2023 is, I think, is the last year of their contract. So the city auditor, I believe, it's the city auditor's job to go out and do an RFP. I believe that's the plan.
That's right.
So this is just a small component of the audit they do of the entire city.
Oh, yeah, right,
So-
of course.
Correct, but you're still required to have an audit by statute because of the amount of money.
Right. Right.
All right.
Thank you, Barbara and Tiffany.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to the next agenda item. Presentation from no, actuary evaluation report. This is Joe Griffin.
Yep.
Okay.
Feel free
Can you
to,
hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
feel free to share your
Oh,
screen if you want.
Yeah, Joe, if you prefer to share your screen, you can, but we've got your presentation pulled up here as well.
Oh, I see it, perfect. If you'll just, scroll through for me, William, that'll be great. if you don't
Okay.
mind. So, thanks for having me. For everybody in the room, I'm Joe Griffin with Foster & Foster. I serve as the board's actuary. And I'm here presenting the October 1, 2021 actual evaluation set contribution requirements for fiscal 2023. And as you heard from your auditor, there have been some delays in getting the financials together for fiscal 2021, which also delayed the actual evaluation report. Normally would be out in the springtime to present this, but due to those delays, we are just finishing up on the evaluation now. William, if you'll fast forward a slide. So I put together a summary that I'm going to go through, just kind of some of the key highlights of the valuation. There's a full valuation report that gets submitted to the state in the format that the state requires, which is also provided to the board. I will make one note about that valuation. As you saw from the audit report, the draft you just approved, we just got that last night. So we noticed that the assets matched exactly what we used in our valuation, but there was a page that had a different allocation of the investments that we'd like to update in our report to match the auditor. So at the end of this, assuming you approve our valuation and report, I'd like to make subject to the change that we make the investment allocation pages consistent with what's in the draft audit. So let's talk about membership. William, are you going to go to those pages? Okay, thank you. Let's talk about membership and what's changed from the prior year. As you can see, the blue bar contains the number of active police officers in the plan. That's down from 243 to 226 as of October 1, 2021. Firefighters, active firefighters, 163 versus 157 in the prior year. The skinny little navy bar is deferred members. You have 42 members in the plan who are former employees, but stayed on with the city long enough to vest in their pension benefits and are due a benefit in the future. We have, as of October 1, 2021, 34 drop members. And if you look at retirees, beneficiaries, and disabled retirees, they be receiving benefits, that's the green bar, down from 441 a year ago to 439. The total membership is just over 900 as of October 1, 2021. William, if you go to the next page. So this shows the average salary. Quite an increase in salaries based on the collective bargaining agreements. And you'll see, in fiscal 2021, firefighter salaries are up over $71,000 per year on average, and police officers just under $70,000. If you look back a year ago, the average salary for the members, firefighters, just over $65,000, and the police officers were $61,700. So that reflects the increases from fiscal 2020 to fiscal 2021. Those are generally driven by what's in the collective bargaining agreements.
I have a question. Do you have a median number?
Yes.
Do you have a median number in the report of salary?
Of salary?
Yeah.
I don't know that we have a median number. We have the average, which takes the total pay.
That's okay. I can get that locally. Thank you. That's all right. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, I can get that for you. William, if you go to the next page. So I have the, these are retired members. You'll see the firefighters, the average annual pension is $42,471. That's up from a year ago. Remember, some of your members receive cost of living adjustments at various ages. Police officers are up from $37,841 to $38,626. We would expect these averages to go up over time just due to the cost of living adjustments. Plus, firefighters and police officers who retired today are generally making more than the police and fire that retired, 40, 50 years ago, who might be falling off the roll. So you'll see this average generally increase over time. If you go to the next page, William. Now, I have the fortune of coming to you today and looking back at October 1, 2021. The folks at Willis College Watson don't have that luxury. But you'll see that the returns for fiscal 2021 were quite strong, just over 23% on a market basis. And you've actually had a pretty good run if you look at the market returns going back to 2016. Double-digit returns except for 2019 and 6.65 in 2020. The actuarial return, which is what we use in the valuation, tends to not be as volatile to make sure that contributions stay fairly level over time. So you'll see that the return on the actuarial value was only 10.43%. The good news is with that 23% return, even if we have bad years in the future, as we're seeing here in fiscal 2022, we saved some of those gains from prior years to offset losses in future years, so that way the city's contribution to funded status remain fairly steady as opposed to bouncing all over the place.
And we're using a 5-year smoothing to get that, right, Joe?
Yeah, you're using a 5-year smoothing. For this valuation, we lowered the investment rate of return assumption from 7.9 to 7.75. We talked about that at a previous meeting, and we also fresh started the assets to the market value as of October 1, 2021, and moved to a 5-year smoothing. We were on a 5-year smoothing, but it wasn't a preferred method. So the board's moved to a preferred method for that smoothing. So we'll, even though we might have poor returns in fiscal 2022 relative to your actual assumption, not to the market, to the assumption, that'll be smoothed out over a 5-year period. So it won't have a dramatic effect on next year's contribution to department. If you go to the next slide, William. This shows you the asset values in total on a market basis. You'll see for fiscal 2021, we're just shy of 300 million. You take that snapshot as of October 1, 2021, we're at almost 350 million. Back in 2012, we split the assets out between police and fire. It's one commingled fund still invested in one way with one actuary, one auditor, but we've been allocating the assets between police and fire. So you see the police share is 206.6 million and the fire share 141.6 million as of October 1, 2001. And to do that allocation, we split it based on the liabilities back in 2012, and then we've just been tracking the returns and cash flows since then. So that's kind of where we stand. Next slide, please. So here's your actual basis, and you'll see that the market value equals the actual value for this valuation as we reset the assets. At the same time, we change the investment rate of return assumption. But you'll see in the future, as we work in gains and losses, that the actual value, as it has in the past, will be a much more steady, smooth value that we use for calculating contributions as opposed to the market value, which is a little bit more volatile. And just skip to the next page, William. All right, so what's driving the changes this year? Really, the investment gain was quite strong. You had a $7.5 million gain on the asset side. That was offset by significant salary increases for fiscal 2021 of about $6 million. So those are the two large drivers of the changes in funded status for this year. And largely offsetting, although at the end of the day our total gain was $300,000. That is very small relative to the total liability. So not too much to report here, other than you had some offsetting asset gains and liability losses for salary increases higher than expected. So looking at the whole piece of the pie, this circular pie chart shows the present value of $357.3 million. So in theory, if we had that in the bank today, we wouldn't have to put another dollar into the plan, assuming our assumptions are met. We don't have $357 million in the bank, and that's not how we fund benefits. We fund them as employees accrue their pensions. So in the liability that's been accrued as of this valuation date is $318.3 million. That means there's $39 million of future benefits to be accrued in the plan, also known as future normal costs. And the timing of when the pension obligation bond was placed into the assets and invested, and where we stood as of October 1, 2021, the plan was actually 109.4% funded. So we had almost $350 million in assets, $318 in liabilities, and you can see it broken out between the police and fire. Fire is just over 110% funded, and the police officers just shy of 109% funded. Now, we know that the markets have gone down since this point in time. So your funded status has probably gone down as well, and but this plan is in very good financial state at this moment. So, next slide. All right, now to the required city contribution. So this is basically the invoice the actuary brings to the city every year. The contribution, normal costs went up to almost $5 million. That was largely driven by salary increases. The administrative expenses have gone down on average. So we're assuming $372,000 for fiscal 2023. So the minimum required contribution is $5.29 million, which is 19.45% of payroll. The city switched back to contributing on a percent of payroll basis. You see the member contributions at $2.2 million. That's a blend of the police officers at 7.5% and the firefighters at 9%. The state contribution coming in at 1.1 million. Remember, everything above that 1.1 million goes to the share plan. So the net city contribution is 1.9 million, or 7.13% of payroll, which is down from the prior year. If you'll skip to the next page, William, we can see it for the firefighters. The firefighters' contribution in total is 2.25 million, or 19.63% of payroll. You see that the firefighters are contributing just north of $1 million, 9% of their pay. The expected state contribution at $580,000 is just north of 5% of pay. So from the firefighters' perspective, the city is going to be contributing $640,000, or 5.57% of payroll. That's down from the prior year. If you look at the police officers, you'll see that the police officer contribution is just north of $3 million, 19.3% of payroll. $1.178 million at a 7.5% contribution. The allowable state money for the police is $558,361, or 3.55% of payroll. So the expected city contribution on the police side is just shy of 1.3 million at 8.28%, also down from the previous year. And just to remind everyone, the firefighters have most of their benefits the same from negotiations. I think it was probably 6 or 7 years ago, the police officers elected to give up some of the COLA, so that's why the police have a lower contribution. The firefighters elected to contribute 1.5% more to keep the cost of living adjustments the same. So that's why there's a difference between the two groups and their contribution amounts. Next slide. I guess the only other thing I want to point out to the board is that we look at the most important assumption, the investment rate of return. For this valuation, for the next valuation, we're going to look at everything else. All the demographic assumptions, retirement turnover, mortality is dictated by the state law, so we can't change that other than following what FRS has in their report. But we'll look at salary increases, any other assumption besides the investment rate of return for the next valuation. So in the coming months, we'll be coming back to you with our recommendations there. So I'll pause there and see if you have any questions for me.
The state money's divided equally between police and fire?
No. There's a base amount that, well, actually, the state determines what's allocated to police and fire every year. It's based on a combination of factors, including the total premium taxes collected around the state, as well as each department's payroll compared to every other payroll in the state. Is that more or less correct, Joe?
Yeah, the premium tax is driven by, basically there's a percent of the premiums that the insured throughout the state pay, either car insurance for police officers or home insurance for firefighters. They collect those monies, and then they allocate it out after they take the administrative cut out to the different jurisdictions based on, you know, who's within the city of Gainesville's, you know, basically whoever's insured in Gainesville.
If we haven't looked at our database that we're using in the tax collection for a few years, it may be useful to look.
Due to annexation?
Because we may not be capturing all the buildings, because if you look at the growth.
Because commercials as well, it's not just residential.
It's anything that has fire insurance and anything that has wheels on it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I was reading on it the other day. I don't know if the state's updated all our annexations.
We'll be talking to the state over the next, couple days probably. I'll ask them about that.
Plus the vertical growth.
The best measurement may be any change in your franchise taxes that you get for utilities, because whenever a new utility comes online, I know you're getting a franchise tax. Vertical would apply also. things that weren't here, like recently.
Is there still a 6% payroll cap?
I'm sorry?
Is there still a 6% payroll cap?
Yes, in the statute, it says that the amount of your taxes shouldn't exceed 6% of your payroll, but payroll is not defined as solely the sworn payroll. It can be the payroll of the department, which means anybody who works in the fire department, which would include clerical, administrative, managerial, dispatch.
And the state requires that number in their annual report.
Yes,
We have to
and
provide that.
same thing in the police department. I know we probably have community service aides and other non-power of arrest participants who are still employed by the department, even though for pension purposes, they would be in the city general employees plan.
So what we would need is for the board to make a motion to approve this actuarial val, subject to the updates that Joe mentioned previously to adjust the balance sheet cash to due from city that was included in the auditor's report.
Also move.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second to approve the 2021 actuarial
Easy for you to say.
actuarial valuation with the changes mentioned to match the audit. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion passes.
Thank you. We'll work with Joe and he will submit that final version of the val to the Division of Retirement this week or next week.
Are we expecting any pushback on our assumed rate of earnings?
Well, I'm sure they'll issue a letter suggesting that we review it and consider lowering it.
Like to 2?
But I think we lowered it 15 basis points, which is a step, and if they come back,
That's a
then.
significant step in my view.
Yeah, I think the state would like to see all the local law plans use a 5% or so assumed rate of return, which is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous if you believe in the capital markets.
Right.
We had that discussion 2 years ago, last year.
We have it every year.
Yeah, I
guess.
It never changes.
But our most recent fight was over the payroll growth assumption, which was resolved by significant increases in the collective bargaining agreement and some change.
And some reductions, right? Where is our payroll assumption growth adjusting now?
It is.
Or
It
we
went
gonna
to 0 for, Joe, help me out here. I think it went to 0, but it increased just a little bit this year because we basically saw the average salary increase by 14% or so, right, Joe?
Yeah, the payroll growth assumption we're using is somewhat irrelevant because you're over 100% funded, and so you're not really amortizing an unfunded liability, and that's what the payroll growth is for. The assumption did increase from 0.16% to 0.67%. That's based on the 10-year historical average of the plan. So we increased it, but it really has no impact on the city's contribution for this year. But we want to continue to use that 10-year average in case, at some point we're not over 100% funded, and we want to be able to utilize something greater than 0. So I would expect it would continue to go up based on the salary increases that we've seen in recent years, but it really has no effect on the end result of the contributions due by the city.
You're about the best funded point in Florida. I'm serious.
Well,
But to get that, the city took
Yeah, I was
on
gonna say, it's not
additional
ex-
liability through the pension obligation bonds.
Yes, it traded a 8% mortgage for a 2.85% mortgage,
Exactly.
which was very wise business judgment.
Yeah.
Just to get a sense of that, 90 cities in Texas did the same thing in the last 12 months. And I don't know how many in California. Everybody wanted to catch up on their UAL, so everybody issued debt and pretty much everybody got out where you did 2.8 to 3% soaking wet, including the insurance and the lawyers, and paid off their debts and everybody's pension contributions. Even the U.S. Virgin Islands, which was bankrupt, was able to sell $4 billion worth of bonds. I had no idea who bought them.
But the other side of that is when you take those proceeds and invest them, how is that performance? And, you know, we had a 25%, give or take, year in the initial year that we invested the bond proceeds. It doesn't help if you have a down 10% year.
Well, that's what happened in New Jersey 30 years ago. They issued bonds and then the market took a dump like the next day. And so they lost basically the value of it. The practice since then has been, you were not only smart, you were lucky. And you hit it at the right time. And some other employers have been putting the money in tranches to, you know, basically time the market.
That was it, because I remember that discussion, and again, well, better be smart than lucky. I mean, lucky than smart, but it was a little bit of both, I remember that.
Once in a while.
How many years do we pay on the bond?
I think it's 30. But, you know, it's not level. There are, you know, certain maturities that are more heavily weighted in certain years. So the weighted average life is less than 30. It's probably like 10 or something like that.
But it was a conscious decision.
And it made the state, we remember we were fighting them.
Yeah.
And they just went away.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to argue with full funding.
Yeah, it worked out.
We'll be back.
Thank you, Joe. I'll touch base with you about submitting this updated report to the state.
That sounds good, I appreciate it. And we talked about the state monies, those are on page 39 and 40 of the bigger report, if anybody wants to look at the history going all the way back to 1998. You can see that's fire. Last year the contribution was $670,000, which is above the frozen amount of $580. So $89,923 went to the share plan last year. And if you go down to the police, you'll see that their contribution is significantly higher, $866,000. So they had $308,000 go to the share plan for fiscal 2021.
And I
That
imagine,
gives you the history all the way back to the first distribution in '98.
haven't we had statewide large premium increases this past year?
So your premium tax has gone up. The money that you're going to get is higher than what you got.
So we would probably expect to see that in 22.
Also.
Yeah, for sure.
We'd see that reflected in the 22 money that we'll get at the end of 23.
All right. Thank you, Joe. All right.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, presentation from Willis Towers Watson. Mr. Cole Jacobs.
Thank you, Gene. We'll start on slide 4, so I'll just give a quick capital markets update and the normal performance update as well. Following up the relatively good news from Joe, go into a more sober discussion here with capital markets, and you can see in the top left-hand corner we show equity markets, and this is through July. Year-to-date returns, S&P 500 minus 12.6%. Through this morning, that is minus 19%. So down about 20% in equity markets so far this year. July was actually a really positive month. It was plus 9%. August was minus 4%, and September is about minus 4% as well. Specifically lately, we've seen a lot of volatility around the Federal Reserve's decision to probably raise interest rates another 75 basis points today. We expect that they'll announce that probably kind of midday, and 75 basis points is kind of the median expectation for how much they will raise rates. So that combined with, the inflation factor, geopolitical situation in Ukraine, kind of the same stuff has caused equity markets to be pretty volatile so far this year. It's actually the worst first half of the year since 1970. So pretty poor performance. Fixed income markets also negative, so you're kind of getting hit from both ends of the spectrum. Yields have come up so much, that is why the fixed income markets are down. So in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you see treasury rates there, and you see the blue and the green line is where that was kind of beginning of this year, was the blue line. And that pink line is where we were as of July, and that's actually substantially changed since July. So right now, that 2-year treasury is almost at 4%, and the 30-year treasury is about 3.6%. So that pink line is pretty much at the top of this graph now, and pretty much straight across the whole way. So absolutely huge kind of movement in interest rates so far this year. Given that the Fed has increased so many times, that's kind of moved the short end up, and the long end kind of follows. The average mortgage rate is 6.25% right now. So just how do those treasury rates kind of flow into other areas of the market? I found that pretty interesting. Extremely high mortgage rates. So, what does that look like for economic data? You can see that in the bottom left. Inflation remains high. We have 8.5 here. Through August, it's 8.3%. So did kind of marginally tick down a little bit, but still relatively high. GDP growth was revised from minus 0.9% to minus 0.6%. So still negative economic growth for the second quarter. It's actually 2 quarters in a row as well. And the unemployment rate is at 3.7%. So pretty tight labor market still. And so that's kind of help, driving wage inflation, et cetera. So it's kind of flowing through different areas of the market. Any questions on capital markets?
The drop of the inflation is primarily due to gasoline.
Energy is a big piece of that.
How's it going to affect heating oil and stuff going into there? And natural gas is still up.
Natural gas is up, yeah. Oil's up. Oil's actually come down the last month or two. I think, I don't know
99 days in a row is what I think.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It was north of $100 a barrel, and now it's south of that. And so I think the expectation for inflation was that when energy started to come down, that we'd see a reduction, more of a reduction in inflation, and we didn't really see that. There's other areas of the economy that are, shelter is more expensive because mortgage rates are up. So that's a big piece of it. Food is still,
Food's up 15%.
food's up a ton, aviation's up a ton. So even though energy's a large piece of it, there's still kind of other areas of the market that are pretty sticky with inflation.
It doesn't have any relevance to what we're doing today, but I still harken back to 1978 when I was lucky to get a 13.8% mortgage for a home that I built out of.
I had one of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that's what I said. I felt very lucky to get
no,
it.
that's account was paying 12.7.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, I was in 78, but nevertheless, now, I mean, it's apples and oranges totally, and I understand that, but I get much less exercised about interest rates on mortgages than perhaps some who are just entering the market.
Yeah,
The scary part of the 6 is that's where we were in 06 when I jumped into mine because I was scared it was going to be back to 13, 15%.
Right, yeah.
And so we were hunting for a house, and then a couple of years later, so if we
Well, you got all Bob's and my money, so it was all right.
Yeah. Well, we don't have mortgages.
10 years.
First Naples federal ever had.
maybe we're heading for a big crash in the real estate market.
You can wait, but don't hold your breath. I mean, that's what everybody's looking for, a crash.
Yeah.
And it just, you have to read Revelations 23 times, and then you can maybe begin to believe it, but otherwise, it's a cycle.
It is. And I mean, valuations, and you can see that on, going into performance on slide 5. I mean, it's been really, really strong years leading up to this year. And you saw that in the Foster & Foster presentation. I mean, there's never been, I think in the last 5 years that they showed, there was no negative fiscal year performance result. Looks like that's going to happen now for the first time. Despite being down 20% so far this year, you look at the long-term numbers, S&P 500 3-year return is up 13%. So despite a 20% correction, 3 years, you still earned double digits.
Right.
So it's all kind of perspective as well. If you look at just the last 6 months, it's terrible, of course, but over the longer term, the capital markets have, been very favorable to the plan. And just kind of looking at a few of those numbers. So the top line total plan fiscal year to date is down minus 7.2%. So this is also through July, so we have 2 more months of the fiscal year here. And as I mentioned, it's August and September aren't shaping up to be wonderful, or September at least is not. So it's probably going to to be around minus 9, 10%, something like that, fiscal year to date. In a market that's down 20%, that's not a bad result. The pension plan is benefiting from the income segment, which has generated positive returns. The growth segment, of course, being all equities, has been a little bit more negatively impacted. So you can see large cap segment year to date, kind of right around the benchmark, minus 13.8 versus minus 13.6. So value and growth stocks have performed differently. You can see LSVs performed much better at minus 8% year to date versus sustainable growth providers at minus 22%. So big dispersion between growth and value. At the segment level, the portfolio is benefiting from investing in both, right? So you're diversifying that specific risk. Same in the small cap segment, minus 12.7% versus the benchmark of minus 15.4 year to date. So positive relative performance there. Both managers are beating their benchmark. And some disappointing performance from the international equity manager Mower.
Yeah.
Minus 21% versus minus 15% for the benchmark there. They are they're a little bit of a growthier manager, so they hold growthier names, which, as you can see, growth has not done as well as value. And the benchmark we're comparing them to is kind of just a core benchmark. So that's part of the reason for their underperformance, but nonetheless, they've had a pretty bad year. Prior to this year, they had positive performance across all time periods. So it's really been 1 year that's kind of dragged down their long-term results.
So is it too early to start thinking about a Santa Claus rally?
Never say never.
Never say never, right?
But yeah, I think overall the market seems pretty pessimistic in kind of all aspects.
We close out the end of this month.
Say what?
Our fiscal year
Yeah.
closes out the end of this month.
Yeah, here in a week and a half. So we'll see. I mean, markets are up today, but I don't expect that there'll be any kind of significant rally the next week or two, but you never know. Page 6, looking at the income segment here, fiscal year to date, this is up 4.9% versus 5.2%. So actually had some positive performance from the income segment, which we would expect in this market cycle. That's all really coming from real estate, which has been the only positive performing piece of the portfolio. The alternative credit segment is kind of right in line with its benchmark, minus 2%. So we're not seeing the same level of volatility there as we are in the equity markets. So performing kind of as expected in the alternative credit segment. And then, like I said, real estate performing underneath the benchmark, 16% versus 22%, largely driven by Harrison Street's performance. But nonetheless, 16% performance on 10% of the portfolio is certainly beneficial in this market environment.
And I guess by now we've fully changed our investments from into the real estate segments?
There is, yeah, so one update on that. So the Harrison Street Social Infrastructure Fund
Right.
was funded at the beginning of July. It's not shown on this because
That's
we
good.
need a full month of performance. So that's at 5% weight. So next meeting, you'll see that line item on here now. The Nuveen Industrials Fund is not yet funded. You're still in the queue for that one.
Okay.
Oh,
okay, yeah, that's right, it's
Yeah.
not our call.
Right, you have to wait on them to kind of find an investment and
Right.
call you up and
Yeah.
say, we need your money now.
Right.
So I think, we expected that would happen at some point this year, maybe bleeding into next year. So I think here in the next few months, get closer to drawing down that capital. So given where the market is, that's where we see, opportunities in capital markets is in the kind of real estate, alternative credit space, those niche sectors that, can provide a little bit more resilience in, what might be a recessionary environment. Any questions on performance? Okay. Did have one more thing wanted to cover briefly related to our fees. So I think William attached a note that I had sent him. So I wanted to discuss that with the board. So as a company, Willis Towers Watson is raising its fee 10% for every one of our clients. Obviously, that's not wonderful news to hear, but given the state of the economy, where inflation is, where the labor market is, technology resources, et cetera, we felt the need to remain competitive and remain an employer that folks want to work for. So we want to invest in our people, in our technology, and our resources. And so because of that, as I mentioned, all of our clients are experiencing a 10% increase in fees. We have not made a change to your fee since the onset of our relationship in 2017. And since that time, cumulative inflation is 21%. So you're still, quote, winning, but nonetheless wanted to make you aware of that change in fees. Happy to answer any questions or discuss that further.
And your fee, it's an absolute number, it's not gain sharing
That's right, yeah. So,
or gain losing.
right.
Whatever, that's probably not a phraseology
Yeah.
that I would recommend, but.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, yeah, not compensated when assets go up, such as when bond proceeds were
Right.
invested.
It's in your court now, I guess, right, to have a look and evaluate?
Well, I mean, we'd spoken to the board before about, there's an issue sort of combined with this, I think, and that's the delegated investment program that we're in with Willis Towers Watson compared to the more traditional agreement or relationship we had with them previously. And I think in that relationship, our annual fees were maybe 140 or 150.
Yeah, like 170 maybe.
170.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I recall going to 340 was more than double. So I want to say, back in 2017 or 18 when we did this, it was probably around 140 or 150. So, and in our analysis of that change to the delegated investment program, we did show that there were some savings related to reduced investment manager fees. And so over that period of time, our analysis internally was that we more or less broke even. I don't think that we saved hundreds of thousands of dollars a year because we didn't, and we never were going to have private equity or hedge fund of funds. We used hedge fund of funds in the past and had some bad experiences, and there are just a number of reasons, including the high fees, the lack of transparency, the high volatility given certain market conditions, that sort of thing, lockups and whatever. So what it looks like is if we do the fee increase, then the delegated investment program is actually going to be costing the plan more than the plan is saving in the reduced fees. Now, I haven't done a full-blown analysis on it, but it's probably going to be in the $20,000 to $30,000 a year range because we were more or less breaking even before, So to me, the larger question is, does the board still want to be involved in the delegated investment program? If it does, then, it's up to the board to make a call of whether you think this fee increase is acceptable. I would assume that if the board doesn't like this fee increase, then we, wouldn't be able to continue a relationship with Willis Towers Watson. Would that be the case, you think?
Yeah, if there is significant pushback, we can bring our senior leadership in to have a more robust discussion about the relationship. But one clarifying point there, this new fee would be, so you were saving about $20,000 a year net, and now it's going to be -10.
Okay.
So it's a,
Is
0.01%.
that relative to 2017? Is that when
That's just if you want the delegated relationship
Right,
or
yeah.
not, because you're saving on some of the investment management fees, using our preferred managers and our preferred pricing with those managers.
Right,
So
yeah.
if you just had the same portfolio minus the delegated, it's pretty much break even.
I think it's the real estate and.
Real estate, mower, and yeah. So if those assets increase at all, then it's going to be, more of a fee savings.
So it looks like we have a decision to make. Do we want to counteroffer, approve the fee increase?
Not like going back in the office and talking to the manager.
When's it go into effect?
Is it October 1, I believe is what it
Yeah,
says.
that's right.
That's the planned date of effect. That's what their schedule was.
Were any of us on the board? I don't believe I was on the board in 2017 when that change occurred, although I've been on a few years. Gene, have you been on? You haven't been on that long either. have you?
I think you were on just before me,
Yeah, and when did you come
I
on?
was here.
18.
Yeah,
Me,
that's my
I came in
recollection
13.
too. Steve might be the only person who would ever.
Steve would be the only person who, well, I replaced Steve with you in 13. And, I remember that you made a change in the way you were doing business.
Mhm.
Agreed to the delegated program because it made sense. Never asked me 9 years later. I remember the details.
Well, I think there's other pieces of other than the fees and the savings is how we conduct monthly business.
Yeah.
As far as, do we want to sit here and see 6 different money managers, or do we want to take the best 2 and brought before us?
The problem I have, Eugene, is if the top guy falls off the preferred list.
That's a possibility, yeah.
The question is whether you're satisfied with the service that you're getting.
Right.
If you notice, your administrative expenses are half of what they were the preceding year, which means obviously I'm not charging you.
So we get good investment advice for pretty good.
Over the phone.
Yeah, fair. No, the question is, I always tell pension funds, so we represent them all the way up into the 100 billion plus category. I say don't, cut off your nose to spite your face for money.
I think that's probably.
And if the question is the service that you're getting worth the money? If it is, then I'm not too worried about fees. If you don't, if there's a belief, particularly from if the staff is recommending to you that you look at the market, then you'll look at the market. Even if you agree to the fee increase, you could always replace somebody.
What are we in contract for?
It's an evergreen contract, so.
It's on a 30-day.
Oh, wow.
Everybody who works for you is and should be 30, 60, short term, just to
I
create.
didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah, I
sense.
serve your pleasure 30 days.
Well, what kind of action, Gene, expect we should take?
Well, I'm prepared to make a motion. I want to make sure I'm in my rights as the
Yeah,
chair.
you know what, yes, everybody, while we use Robert's rules as a guide for orderly discussion, keeping order at this meeting isn't a problem. But every member of the board is here because they're representing a constituency by statute. So therefore, somebody's got to be the chair, and if the chair couldn't make a motion, it would deprive that constituency, whether it's police, fire, or the city, of a vote that's theirs statutorily. So yes, you can make a motion.
Bob is our Robert.
I'm sorry?
You're our Robert.
I am.
I move we accept Willis Towers Watson's fee proposal going forward.
I'll second that.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Under discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes.
There probably should be some writing that comes from just an addendum to the existing contract that just shows the fee.
Okay.
And recites that all other provisions of the contract remain as is.
And that'll probably adjust slightly.
There was already a fee increase built into that.
Oh,
Budget, I don't create that document, budget does, and I asked them to send it to me so I can provide feedback, which they don't always do, and they have a method where they just build in increases over time.
I think we significantly increased the investment management fees last year.
Right.
Doubled them, and then if we're under, then we're under budget.
The budget is just a plan.
Right.
It's really, it's a good guideline to have, but with respect to the pension plan, it's not the same as the budget for the city, which is a strict document that, says you can only spend this much. Within the pension plan on administrative fees, we can spend whatever we need to, So it's there as a guideline, but it's not as restrictive as the city's budget. There's a statute that requires you to have a budget.
Mhm.
It doesn't say that you can increase or decrease it over time. Yeah.
All right. No other discussion under the topic? Cole, are you hanging out?
I can.
You don't have to, I don't think, but I was just, all right, where do we go?
Move to update for Mr. Farmington.
Board attorney update.
The only interesting thing has been that the SEC has started investigating collective funds that say they're ESG pure, that say that ESG is the underlying component of their philosophy. I guess because there's no way to measure it. And the question is really yet what you pay for. ESG, if it's not familiar, environmental, social governance. Governance you've been doing all along, because if companies that you own through your various managers are poorly governed, you're ditching them and getting new ones. That's why you're selling, buying and selling. Social is a more difficult issue to answer that can relate to whether the products that they make are made overseas, then there's a question of child labor or fair wages, or if it's an agricultural product, whether the farmers are getting the right amount of money. And it can also be internally about racial and gender diversity, and particularly in environmental. I think it's a component of everything. There are 24 states that have restricted ESG primarily on the environmental side. And those are states where oil is a big deal. And those states where oil is not that big a deal, they went the other way and are requiring some ESG. We have funds in California and Vermont, and I have to deal with the fact that they're very environmentally sensitive there by statute. whereas we also represent funds Texas, Idaho, and Louisiana, where they specifically say if the manager is boycotting fossil fuels, then you can't invest with that manager. The big controversy really is over BlackRock. If you have $1 invested anywhere, chances are BlackRock's got some of it, because they're a multi-trillion-dollar, operation, and they recently put out information, which I'm meeting with the state of Louisiana about Friday, to say that they judge companies on their performance and environmental as a consideration, but value to the customer in terms as an investor is their #1 goal. That's the big discussion nationally. And other than that, the state is leaving us alone for now, which is good. The only other thing we have pending, of course, is we have 2 issues here, the disability, and we have a question of how do we address plan changes with regard to separated vested members. And I'm ready to take up either one of those, Chairman, in whatever order you think's best.
Okay. Let's discuss, are we going to be actually having the disability hearing, or we're just asking questions about it?
Well, I mean, you have, based on your process, this would be the first consideration. If Mr. Pinkston is denied and wants to bring in witnesses, he could get a more robust hearing before the board at a later time. But you do have the ability, based on the medical information which you've been provided, plus Mr. Pinkston gave a statement, a written statement. One thing that should be required based on what the cases say is if that's intended as Mr. Pinkston's testimony, he should be sworn and just affirm that the information that's in the memo that he created and provided is correct.
And I would just point out that Melissa Rodriguez just joined the meeting. She is risk management staff, and I think she'll be helping us walk through the documentation if the board wants to see any documentation on the screen. And so I think we'll rely on both Melissa and Bob to sort of guide us through the process.
I mean, essentially, to cut to the chase, which I'm a big believer in, there are three things that must be established in order for a participant in our plan to get a service-connected disability retirement. The disability must be permanent, it must be total, and it must have arisen in the line of duty. Let's start with the issues of permanent total. I don't think any of the medical providers have said otherwise, other than that Mr. Pinkston's not capable of performing as a police officer for the city of Gainesville. The question is, what's the cause? In Mr. Pinkston's written statement, which was provided to you, there's a number of causes. He says that he had applied to the Veterans Administration for disability rating based on jet fuel exposure from his prior military service. He's claimed that he suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder based on having seen a film or video of sexual abuse of a child. Yet, I think his job as a detective involved seeing those things. There is case law in that says that police officers and firefighters see terrible things. Mr. Pinkston would have to prove that that is the cause. There is a presumption statute in Florida, 112.1815. Get that on the screen so I don't have to go from memory. Because I do not believe that the information provided meets the presumption.
This came out about a year ago, correct?
It's actually been around a little bit longer than that, not a lot.
To me, that's been. Now, I thought I thought this presumptive was, it well defines situations that might lead to PTSD.
Correct, and in that statute, it says, first of all, you have to have been diagnosed according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, published by the American Psychiatric Association. And by the way, there's now a 6th edition, but it has not primarily altered the standard that's in the statute. The statute was really created for workers' compensation purposes, but it has been applied to retirement. And post-traumatic stress disorder resulted from a first responder acting in the course of his or her employment, and 1, you were diagnosed by a licensed psychiatrist, or one of the following events: seeing for oneself a deceased minor. That's where you come up on the scene and you see it yourself. Directly witnessing the death of the minor. That could be primarily, I would think, for firefighters and transport. Directly witnessing an injury to a minor who subsequently died prior or upon arrival at a hospital. Participating in the physical treatment of an injured minor who subsequently died. Manually transporting an injured minor who subsequently died prior to or upon arrival. Seeing for oneself a decedent whose death involved grievous bodily harm of a nature that shocks the conscience. There is a case on that which was coming upon the scene of a vehicle where the inhabitants had been consumed in a fire. Directly witness, or what happened probably in Uvalde, Texas, where you come across a mass shooting scene, which I saw one time when I worked in the Miami Police Department. It's been 45 years and I've never forgotten that, because I was there. Seeing for oneself a decedent whose death involved, I just said that. Directly witnessing a death including suicide that involved grievous bodily harm of a nature that shocks the conscience. Directly witnessing a homicide, regardless of whether it was criminal or excusable or self-inflicted. Directly witnessing an injury including an attempted suicide where the person died before arrival and it was of a nature of grievous bodily harm that shocks the conscience. Participating in the physical treatment of an injury including attempted suicide with the same resulting standard, and manually transporting a person who was injured by an attempted suicide. Those are the things that a psychiatrist has to say happened in order for it to be presumed in the line of duty. And remember, the presumption we would be most likely to see at this point would be a heart bill presumption, where you have a firefighter or police officer who's got a clean bill of health at hire, and then at some point in their career suffers a disabling cardiovascular event and is no longer able to serve. There's a presumption that that occurred in the line of duty as long as it was clean. You had a clean EKG and otherwise health tests when you were hired. In this particular case, I do not see in the claim, I mean, I know what I no doubt about what Mr. Pinkston saw and that it affected him, but it doesn't meet the standards in the presumption. So you have to be convinced that his testimony on this, his statement on this point is sufficient to convince you that this disability is in the line of duty. If you believe, as he also stated, that his disability, he said he had brain injury due to jet fuel exposure, which is not related to his employment with the city of Gainesville. He's still permanently and totally disabled. He would then be eligible for a non-service connected disability. And there's some arithmetic involved in that, William.
I'm sorry?
There's some arithmetic calculation between
It's
the
a lower,
service and
it's a
the
lower
non-service.
benefit level. Melissa might be able to tell us the exact percentages.
25%, not line of duty.
That's
Right,
And
it's
some-
42 for an inline.
42 for an inline, 25 for not line of duty or accrued benefit, either one.
Correct. Now, Mr. Pinkston
It's
has...
15%.
I'm sorry,
I believe he's accrued 15%,
15?
right around
Okay.
15 point, whatever 6 years gives you.
Okay. So if he was granted a non-service disability, he would get 25% of his
salary entitlement disability for life. And if he is
Is
granted.
his application for a line of duty
I
disability?
believe it is.
Yes.
And he has is he here, is he on with it? So this
Yeah,
is-
Mr. Pinkston's up there.
Okay.
If Mr. Pinkston's going to offer any testimony or talk at all, I'm a notary, I'll swear him in and whatever. It's not an adversarial proceeding, but his presentation has to be under oath.
Okay.
Mr. Pinkston, did you want to give testimony and be sworn in to do so?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Pinkston, you all recognize him, right? Since I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Pinkston, raise your right hand. I'm a notary public authorized to administer oaths in the state of Florida. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Chairman, I'd suggest you hear from Mr. Pinkston as to the basis of his application, and then we'll hear from Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir. Mr. Pinkston, please, give us your statement on your application.
Yes, sir. I wrote out a statement for the board. I should hopefully make it as easy as possible and not make this thing long and drawn out. But regarding the PTSD presumption, and I guess it was the board's attorney that has said that the burden is on me. I'm sorry, not having a good day today. The burden is on me to prove to the board that I have PTSD, or are you going to stipulate that I have PTSD based on my diagnosis? So I didn't quite understand what he was saying here.
Well, the presumption, it would be automatic if it was if you had claimed one of the things in the statute. It's not. So the board's going to have to be satisfied that the medical reports that it has before it establish that the PTSD is related to this incident.
Okay. Is that the presumption for workers' compensation that you're reading?
The presumption for workers' comp and for pension are the same.
They're the same.
It's 112.1815 Florida statutes.
Okay. That's something that the city's adopted into its ordinance?
The city's governed, the pension plan is governed by it as part of Chapter 112, which applies to pension plans as well.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand.
No, yes, it's part of the state statutes that govern the plan.
Yes, sir. I think if you look at my statement, you'll see that when I came on board in 2016, I was able to pass all the physical, even though being 52 years old, I was able to pass all the physical tests, pass my physical examination, my stress test. Even in 2019, after my acute episode, where I basically started having this numbness and this spasticity on my left side, I was still able to perform my duties. It was only after 2020, after the death investigation, where we downloaded the gentleman's phone and found the child pornography on there, that I really started having some issues and having a very serious decline in my health. So to regress a little bit, Sergeant Griffin and some of the others had asked me to work sex crimes numerous times. And I turned them down because I know that working children, sex crimes is just not something that I'm able to do. I've had to work those in the past, and it's just not, I just don't deal well with those. So when I got this notice that was child pornography on the phone from the examiner, I tried to turn it over to ICAC. It's their purview anyways. It's something they should have worded. But I guess they were so busy, they were covered up, they didn't have the resources to do it, so it fell into my lap. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with child pornography, but it's not transmittable. You can't just show a video to anyone. So as part of my reporting, I had to watch 4 videos of a young mother performing oral sex on her 18-month-old baby. And I had to watch those numerous times to be able to write out a very clear and concise report that we can forward to whomever, say attorney or whomever. The following day, y'all, my wife, she could tell something's wrong, and she asked me what was wrong, and I started crying. I've never done that before in my career, in my life, on any case. I started having intrusive thoughts, aberrant thoughts. I would come home from a particularly stressful night at GPD on the evening shift, and I would be down my gear, and I would be overtaking this fear that I was going to harm my family. I would actually go and lock my victims up in my car. I know what was wrong with me. I went into the EAP, and they diagnosed me with anxiety, depression, and probably PTSD. Later on, obviously, I went to a psychiatrist, and they diagnosed me with PTSD. But it was the constant stress, and I'll admit, like I said, most probably some of the issues I have were from my military service. It was that constant stress that left me with 15 to 20 debilitating migraines a month. I was having problems with my memory. I'd write a search warrant. I wrote one search warrant for the bank, put the wrong bank on there. I just wasn't safe. And, I had a frank discussion with my physician about that, and I think they agreed. My assertion is that, I may have had some medical problems prior to coming home. I readily admit that. But prior to 2020, I was able to do my job. Even after the, like I said, the acute episode in 2019, it was the stress from the PTSD and having those shootings and rapes and robberies and things that we work every day that exacerbated my symptoms. So that's my position. Like I said in my, my statement to the board, I will leave it to you to decide whether or not you think it's on duty, off duty, or approve or not approve it at this point.
Mr. Pinkston, I have a question. So who was it that diagnosed you with PTSD after the EAP?
It was Dr. Pino. He's the workers' comp, the workers' comp psychiatrist or physician for the city. I don't know. I guess workers' comp's an insurance, but he's our provider. And then the VA has also diagnosed me with PTSD. You should have both of those records.
Dr. Pino issued a report on March 7th, which is somewhere in that package, that stated that Mr. Pinkston has a fair prognosis for his PTSD, which Dr. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yuck.
Y-U-C-H-T?
Yuck.
Yuck. Okay, the Dr. Yuck said to him that indicated that that it did not indicate to him that it was totally and permanently disabling, but Dr. Yuck found that based on his other health problems, functionally, he could not perform anything other than highly sheltered employment, which I know the city does not provide in the police department. Police officers, while there might be shelter employment while something heals, that's going to get better, based on Dr. Yuck's May 23rd opinion, he's essentially said that Mr. Pinkston cannot perform functions that require critical thinking, operation of potentially dangerous equipment, stressful environments, or use of force. So that effectively disqualifies him from law enforcement service. And it said in Dr. Yuck's letter that it said, per Mr. Pinkston's own admission, quote, PTSD exacerbates my jet fuel exposure syndrome symptoms And then Dr. Yu goes on to say Mr. Pinkston is not stating he is in need of a disability due to PTSD, but because stress exacerbates his VA-related disability. Now, aggravation can be a basis for job-related aggravation of a pre-existing condition, can be a basis of a disability under the court decision in Tingley versus City of Tampa. But you have to decide if because it says in Dr. Yu's letter that after an extensive review of all records, I believe that a significant component of the disability, greater than 51%, was present at the time he was hired. There's also the issue, which the board will have to decide is, we take them as we find them. If the city hires them, then whatever happens afterward becomes our problem. And presumably he was functional or he wouldn't have been hired. So those are the issues which the board has to resolve. I still believe that the factual question before you is whether you're satisfied on the basis of the medical records that the PTSD is the primary source of his disability, and that the PTSD is the direct result of the events of watching the child pornography. I think it is a given that all police officers and firefighters have stress from their jobs. I think using that standard, probably every police officer or firefighter in the country suffers from PTSD to some degree, particularly if they've been working on the job for a while. I think after the pandemic, half the country suffers some form of PTSD. But you have to decide if it is that event in September of 2020 that made Mr. Pinkston non-functional as a police officer. If you believe that it is, then a motion would be in order to grant a service-connected disability. If you believe it is not, then a motion would be in order to grant a non-service-connected disability.
I had a question. There was a document included in what we were provided that's an excerpt from the ordinance. And in reading it, it says non-admissible causes of disability, and it lists under C, injury or disease sustained by the member while serving in any armed forces or as a result of warfare. If Mr. Pinkston has already been deemed permanently disabled by the military, is he even eligible?
That was an interesting question. I read that. That's in 2-600. C3 of the code. C3.
C3C.
C3C.
Yes.
And the question is whether he is disabled from that, or whether it is an injury that we hired him with, which the stresses of the job changed from functional to non-functional. I don't think the fact that we hired a veteran with a disability, although remember, it wasn't diagnosed until after he'd been on the job for 3 years. Now, I don't know what his VA record is from prior to the date of hire, but if the city pronounced him employable in 2016, I think we have to accept that as a given. If you believe that this was simply the aggravation of that, the job aggravated the condition, I think that is an admissible cause of disability. If it just was the natural progression of the disease and the job was unrelated to it, it may not be. That's a problem with the hiring. We're stuck with the result, unfortunately.
Mr. Pinkston,
Yes, sir.
what is your VA disability? I know the rating's 100, but I don't, what is it for?
So, maybe one clarification about the question. I didn't file for VA disability until 2019. And it was prior to the acute episode that I had, where, you know, I was numb and thought I was numb and whatever on my side, where I thought I was having a stroke. And that's what led to just research on my own. The VA, you know, some of the symptoms I had were consistent with jet fuel exposure syndrome. However, they won't give me that diagnosis. They just keep telling me I have brain damage. Just every single doctor has told me the same thing. So, you know, who knows? But to answer your question, right now I am rated at 80%. However, the VA considers me totally disabled and unemployable. So they pay me at 100% rate.
Is he working?
No.
I am not working. I haven't worked since March 14, 2022, when GPD sent me home.
So they didn't specifically rate you for each diagnosis? Like 20% for tinnitus in your right ear?
Yeah, I'll actually give me just a second, I'll log in, I'll read you what my diagnoses are. Take just a minute for it to log in. My rating's actually 160%, but their rating system is, I don't understand it, but the total number of ratings I have is 160%. They just rate me at 80 for, I guess, pay purposes.
Is PTSD listed in any of those?
No, sir, it's not.
Bob, I wasn't sure whether, without Steve here, I wasn't sure if the city's risk management department had a stance on this issue.
Well, there certainly can provide commentary to the board. Whoever's going to do it should be sworn.
Melissa, not to interrupt you, Mr. Pinkston, but Melissa, do you know if the risk management department wants to state an opinion on this matter, or if you have a position on it?
We did not have an opinion on it.
Okay, thank you.
The city has accepted it, though, as compensable, correct?
I'm not sure.
Is there currently a workers' comp proceeding?
Melissa?
Or open claim?
There is.
It's not resolved, is that correct, Mr. Pinkston?
It's not been resolved, no, sir. Workers' comp, they accepted the PTSD diagnosis and agreed to treat me medically. They refused to pay me based on Dr. Pino's opinion that I had a fair chance of recovery. And he said I needed to work, that was what was best for me. When I went to Dr. Pino and told him that I was having a lot of physical issues, he said, and I quote, I can't help you. So, I don't know what's going on with that. But anyway, the ratings I have are 30% migraine headaches, and claimed as brainstem damage, service-connected, yes. 10% tinnitus, which I didn't even file for, but they included that in there. 50% depressive disorder due to another medical condition with depressive and anxious features, service-connected, yes. 20% peripheral neuropathy, upper left extremity, all radical nerve groups, ulnar, muscular, cutaneous, circumflex, long thoracic, upper radicular groups, fifth and sixth cervicals, middle radicular group, and lower radicular group nerves, service-connected, yes. 30% radiculopathy, upper right extremity, radial, musculoskeletal nerve, service-connected, yes.
Okay. So at no point in there in the VA's compensation or rating were you declared with PTSD?
Not as a service-connected disability. They treat me at the
VA has a PTSD.
for PTSD, but,
Right.
I haven't, there's no disability rating or PTSD, no, sir.
Bob, the question about the workman's comp claim, what's the hang up with it? It's not closed out, or?
I mean, workers' comp doesn't bind you, and neither do you bind workers' compensation. I was just curious. If the city, the city said it didn't have a position, obviously they haven't resolved the wage loss.
Haven't challenged the worker comp.
They're paying medicals, but the cases say that workers' compensation and pension serve different legal requirements, because in workers' comp, there really is no defense like negligence of the worker, and it's a substitute for the worker's ability to sue the employer for creating an unsafe working condition. Pension, as part of his contract of employment, says that if you meet certain standards, then we'll pay you when you're not otherwise eligible for a service retirement. But I'm looking at he's got doctor handwriting, Shychuk.
Excuse me. David Jarvis is going to be coming over shortly to talk about the workers' comp.
Oh, great. But Dr. Shychuk says in his 2/18/22 report, bottom of the page, he says significant anxiety, depression, PTSD, limiting work, physically limited by severe hemiplegic and vestibular migraine, which triggers left-sided pain, numbness, tenderness, and memory issues. So it would appear that while it says PTSD is present, that's not the disabling condition. What?
Is that IME?
Yeah, it says City of Gainesville Physician's Assessment. I assume we sent them here, right?
Melissa, we might need your input on this. The Dr. Scheisse, was he the city's physician reference that reviewed this?
It was Dr. Yuck.
It's probably the workers' comp doctor.
No,
Dr. Yuck's the general workers' comp. So
right,
if
and
your arms
Andrew
are
Shychuk is a psychiatrist, I believe.
right. All right.
Dr. Shachuk was my PCP over at UF Health Shands.
Okay.
Dr.
Not-
Yuck.
Not through workers' comp, correct?
No, he's not for workers' comp. He's my
All right.
Why does it
PCP.
say City of Gainesville?
Because he's got it's a City of Gainesville 1948 forms that they brought. He probably got from EHS and took it to his primary care physician. I wish
That makes
Steve
sense.
was here, though. You do need to update those forms down at risk management. Or,
If you're
employee health.
concerned that Steve's absence is interfering with your ability to get to the bottom, for lack of a better, to your satisfaction, you can defer the matter, because even if you grant the benefit, it would be retroactive. It's retroactive to the first pay period after he goes off the payroll. So if the disability is granted, whether service or non-service, so, the deferral for that purpose, it may be to your advantage to learn.
It would be for mine, certainly, and Steve has a valid reason.
Well, as long as somebody from risk management's gonna come
There's
down
a lot
and
of
at least.
documents pertinent to this, because I couldn't view them. Can we make sure somehow we can see all the documentation?
Yeah, and
Because you're
I
talking about forms that.
discussed that. You should have been able to use the Dropbox to see all of the sort of Word or PDF type documents. There were some image documents that I'm not sure how relevant they were to this discussion.
Some of them there's repetition in there also.
But to view those, you needed to download an application that was in the Dropbox and load it on your computer, and then you would be able to see those images. And I discussed that with Melissa.
Yeah,
I wasn't
there's
actually able to see it.
Tons of non-pertinent stuff in there
Right.
that were for other companies. What's deferral would be deferring, so
Deferral would be deferring any decision on the application for the present time to your next meeting.
Which right now is scheduled for November, but if the board wanted, we could have a special meeting in October.
That's probably good.
And either I can come back or do it by Zoom. I mean, I came, because we had two issues today.
And deferral is the, not making a motion.
You're making, in other words, you're not going to, no motion would be in order today other than to continue the matter.
Right.
And that's not, there's no prejudice to the applicant, because if his benefit is granted, if any benefit is granted, whether it's service or non-service, it's retroactive to, I think you said went off the payroll in May. That would be the next pay period would be when he starts getting paid.
Is he off the payroll?
I think
Is
so.
he off the payroll?
I'm not sure, Mr. Pinkston, are you still being paid or you're not being compensated at this time?
No, sir, I'm not being paid. I had 1 month of pay, after the March 14th when I was sent home. I think it was an injury pay. And then there was a little bit of leave that I had left, and so I haven't been paid since then. So I think that would be, April, I believe. was
So
when
then
the last
any
paycheck.
benefit, if granted, would be retroactive to April.
Well, I would like to extend it through into a special meeting in October. And for my personal attendance, October 5th or 19th works for me. Does it work for you? Or does?
That's during the conference is the 5th.
Okay, well,
The 5th? The 5th is during the conference, the 19th? Is that the other
19th
day?
works.
The 5th is actually, I can't, it's Yom Kippur. I would be atoning for my sins and yours too.
Thank you very much. Okay.
And what was the other date you gave? The
The
19th?
19th, yeah. So these are just Wednesdays. I guess it wouldn't have to be a Wednesday.
I could do it virtually, unless I get somebody to cover Fort Lauderdale in the middle of the day. So I'll leave that up to you. If you need me to schedule somebody to be there, I'll do it.
I'm out of town that whole week.
That whole week?
Well,
I'm okay on 12th and 26th.
November would,
Did you say, I'm sorry?
12th and 26th, I'm okay.
Not to push it out, but if October doesn't work, we do have a meeting scheduled in November that I think works for everyone.
What's the,
The November meeting date is
16th.
16th.
Yeah.
yes, November.
I
16th.
plan not to be here for that, so never mind. You're going to be short one anyway for this, it sounds. So
Would you be
I
able
could,
to-
I could call in.
Okay.
I could call
So
in.
you- that would be it.
Yes, I could do it either, I could do it in person or virtually your call,
November,
November. Yeah.
the scheduled meeting.
Yeah, I just need to be
So there's a
done.
motion to defer this
Decision.
agenda item to the next scheduled meeting in November. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Under discussion.
Under discussion, maybe it would be useful, even though there are duplications and non-pertinent medical information in the file, because we have disabilities so infrequently, it might be worth it to push the button on the printer for anybody who wants a hard copy. Seriously.
Yes,
who wants a hard
that's a
copy.
good
I mean, I
idea.
have it by Dropbox, but I have somebody who did it for me, because I don't know how to do
And-
that.
Staff can work on that. In the meantime, we can print out some copies for board members and get them mailed to you if you want hard copies of.
And we should also mail a hard copy of what the board's going to see to Mr. Pinkston. Even though he has his own records, he should see what the board's going to be.
Could we request from Mr. Pinkston, the applicant, to clean up some of the stuff in the file? Because I don't even
Well,
know.
the burden really is on, I mean, we're helping out here, but
Right.
because of the informality of the proceeding, I mean, it's Mr. Pinkston's job to convince you.
Right.
You don't.
Mr. Pinkston, do you
Not my
understand
job
what
to convince you.
what we're asking for here?
I think so. You want me to,
If you could
pare
pull
down
out
the
the
file
medical,
somewhat?
Mr. Pinkston, if you could pull out the records that you believe most compellingly establish your claim.
This claim with the city of Gainesville. Not
Okay.
with, not with for previous VA, not with, I don't know what was in there about the Dodge Chargers. They looked like the Dropbox, like I don't think you probably would need more than 10 documents to get, but I'm not trying to limit you, I'm just trying to, we had a hard time looking at it ahead of time to decipher what was pertinent to this claim.
I guess questions, do you want me to let me know if you want me to come in person or do it virtually?
Well, we'll let you.
I'm-
We got
I'm
time.
cheaper virtual.
Yeah, I think either way is fine. So, David?
Sorry to interrupt, my name is David Jarvis. I understood you had some questions about workers' comp claim?
I think the questions may be moot unless.
Yeah, actually, Mr. Jor, I'm Bob College, I'm a lawyer for the fund. Pleasure meeting you. What the board has decided to do is because there's a need for additional information, they have deferred a decision on this matter to the November meeting.
Okay.
If there are any documents in the city's risk management file related to Mr. Pinkston's claim that he is disabled as a result of an event in September of 2020, which he says precipitated his post-traumatic stress disorder, I think what the board would be interested in is any risk management reports relating to September 20 and forward.
Okay.
Okay? Does that do it, Chairman?
Yes, yes it
Okay.
does.
And if you could
And
provide
I'll
those to
work
William
on-
or Gregory, then I think we're good.
Okay.
I'll work on paring down those documents, for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome. So would you like me to just resubmit those to Melissa?
Well, either that or just let us know which documents you think are most relevant and we can print those out and provide them to the board members.
Yep.
Okay.
Staff, city staff can do that.
And
Yes, sir.
Donna, you have the ability to edit in the Dropbox.
So we can delete files if.
Okay.
So we'll do that. We'll work with Mr. Pinkston on that and updating the Dropbox. And then once we get to a point where we think we've got the pertinent information, we'll email that and hard copy it to the board members.
All right.
That'd be fun. Submission.
I believe we're still under discussion on the motion. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes, will be deferred to the next scheduled meeting, November. All right.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate your time. Y'all have a good day.
You too.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Pinkston. All right. He's signed off.
Can we take about a 2-minute recess for the next item?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, I got coffee going through me.
It's hard to, we didn't get on top of this as much as we could have because we kind of thought Steve would walk us through it, so.
Yeah, well, I don't think I would. I don't see how anybody would easily went through any of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I kind of thought I thought Steve would have had an opinion, that would represent.
Well, I know Steve would have had an opinion.
Yeah.
Right. Sit too long.
Yeah.
I did apply for land,
Hmm?
yes.
Yeah.
Applied for land.
These are always tough decisions, even regardless of what the fact situation is. You gotta a brittle and damaged personality.
I thought Steve's position was not that he didn't think that there was a disability, but whether it was line of service or
Yeah,
not,
well,
line of duty or not line of duty. I thought that was Steve's main issue, but I could be wrong.
I mean, I don't, clearly he's not a man at this stage in his life that you would want on the street. Clearly. But what caused that, what precipitating factor?
Well, and, you know, as Bob said, there's a question of, the hiring process. Was he somehow disabled even during that process? If so, why was he hired in the first place? But, that's why.
Well, that's the thin eggshell,
Yeah.
Issue of when you got somebody that you're dealing with. I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah.
It's, I know you didn't think you hit the person, but.
Well, the PTSD claim is difficult because, like Bob said, every single one of us could file for that. I know he had the one experience and it affected him traumatically, but I worked cases like that for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's traumatic to see.
It was traumatic.
Does it meet the level of
But
seeing
it's also
people
just
dead in the street?
part of our job.
Yeah.
And we've all done that too, and
So much
it's kind of what you sign up for
Yeah, exactly.
when you do this job.
Yeah. I think it's better to have Steve here for the discussion.
Yeah, I do too.
All right. Okay. I'll be done.
Coping mechanisms are absolutely absent with this. And the jet fuel thing puzzles me. Is it just being around jet fuel, or is it the aroma?
I think it's inhaling it.
Inhaling it. That's what he was, so my question for Bob, which was answered because, he put it all out there, but he came into my office back in January and was telling me about
Oh, Mr. Pinkston.
all of the neurological things that he's experiencing, and he attributed it all to the jet fuel and didn't mention anything about anything else. And it just got me thinking, well, if, and he had talked about, getting disability from the VA, and then I heard a different story, and then I heard he was applying for this, and so I was just like, but he's being honest about it and putting it all out there that, that exists.
He certainly is, yeah.
So that's good, at least.
They're never easy. We got a guy from disability carrying one of those old time 3 magnet TVs in the backpack.
I know that years ago, might have been in the 90s, there was a disability where I guess the city questioned it. After he received the disability, there was a guy who was evidently jousting at medieval tournaments.
Oh, that was, I know who that was, yeah. I remember that.
And so I can't remember what happened if I know they discussed taking away his disability after that, but I'm not sure if they did or not. I think his point was he couldn't kneel because of a knee injury or something like that, but that didn't prevent him from riding a horse. Something like that, I'm not sure.
Getting on the horse is tough. But once it's like
foot disturb.
Yeah, exactly. It's like flying. Flying's not a problem. Landing?
But yeah, they're never easy. There's always some gray.
Yeah, I know. We've had one before, but in my tenure, and I've forgotten. Well, I just don't remember even the fact situation. But I presume we granted it after some considerable discussion, and it wasn't dicey at all.
Maybe we take one pass.
They're very seldom clear cut.
Are they all the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody ready?
Yep, sure.
Next item on the agenda, vested, terminated member benefit eligibility. This was requested by me to be on an agenda for several months.
But I think we have the budget, don't we?
After that.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, I totally missed it, Gene, sorry.
I've forgotten easily, it's not big. The reason for the request was, there's always been confusion amongst members, even our previous board trustee for the fire side, about when you were vested and due a benefit, if you left, before attaining the 20 or whatever rules you were tied to. And I think it arises from going back to the 1997 implementation of 175 and 185 funds. We know that doesn't happen overnight. The money doesn't even come in right away. It's new legislation. The boards are supposed to be given time to bargain changes that need to be changed in order to get in accordance with the minimum statutes. And over the years, so our ordinance now seems in line with all the 175, 185 statutes. As far as, I try to do some research going back and looking at when we got into compliance, because we have recently had a couple fire members that terminated vested, so they did 10 years of service, and they left after 97, and they were, at the time, the provision in the plan, the ordinance, said they were not due a benefit until age 60, which was the traditional, I guess, prior to the 1997. It's always been that same provision. I've asked William a couple times about, and it seems like we say that there's a difference between terminated vested and normal retirement. But I don't think there's a difference in the 175 and 185 statutes on how they treat vested versus retirement. So if you read the 97 statute that was out in 97 and it's still out today, it hasn't changed.
Actually, it was the only thing that's changed from the 97 step. Now, you got the 99 on there, right?
Nah,
The 99 actually says what our plan says in 2-600E1. It says a member who has 10 years of credited service and elects to leave his contributions in the trust may, upon attaining age 50, receive the actuarial equivalent of the amount of such retirement otherwise payable to him or her, which is what you just handed out says. And in 99 they added, or upon attaining age 55 can then get the unreduced normal retirement.
Okay, yeah, they did clean up that part.
Yes.
So that when they
That's
had
the
it
only
written,
change, and that is in our plan.
when they wrote it in 97, they allude to the 50 years, but they don't tell you that that's actually what a reduced benefit, because the reduced benefits back on the, explains how you get the 50 back on the 175, 162 statute, the main part of the statute. The second page in the back, early retirement under the plan, you have 10 years. So the question I brought up is, we have two members that I know left, and the reason why it came to my attention is they called me, one of them called me recently because she just turned 60 within the past year, and she says, hey, I called risk management, and I told them I'm 60, what do I got to do to come down to sign up for my benefit? And at the time, this is what she explained to me. She says that the young lady at risk management told her, no, it's age 65. And so that was why she reached out to someone and got my number and called.
When was it ever 65?
I think the general plan, maybe 65.
So it may have been. I don't even think the general plan's that old.
I have to look. I don't know off the top of my head.
So she may have just made up a number. And I mean the person she had on the phone, risk management. But it seems to me there's been several occurrences of like someone goes risk management and they get told things that are in the general provision of the plan. And I can see where that's gonna happen sometimes because we have two different ordinances and stuff. What I started to look at and research after she called me about that, I said, no, it's, you know, I said it should have been 55, but let me go back and look and see when we adopted these changes or when we should have. And so everything I could find is we started getting money in 97 or the fall thereafter. We started getting increases in 99, and we got increases in 99 for several years thereafter, right? Going off
the premium tax money?
Yes.
There's a history of it somewhere. I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head.
He was showing it earlier. Joe was showing it. So there's been increases after 99. The other part is ordinance changes. So sometimes there's supposed to be a chance for ordinance changes, units to bargain, to implement them. So several ordinance changes were made from 97 on, and it's what I can find is in 2007 is when we finally changed our language, like you were stating, Bob, in 2600-E.
That's what I found too.
I think 2007 is when we finally adopted what we should have had.
When did these 10 people leave?
So the two people that I'm speaking about, the 175 members, is the latter part of 2001 and the latter part of 2003. So my question is that acceptable that the ordinance wasn't in compliance with the minimum statutes?
Well, the division of it's presumed that it's in compliance with the state wouldn't give us the money. So when did they start giving us the money? 07? 97.
So
the fall of after 97.
I don't mean to put things off on Steve, but he was involved in that bargaining more than I was. What I recall was the state said that you either had to be at the minimums or working toward the minimums. And I don't think we met all the minimums until bargaining in 2005 or 6, which is when if you look at the history, that's the new base year that was established.
Mm-hmm.
We had a base year established in 98 or 97, and then we had a new base amount established in 2005
Mm-hmm.
because that's when we bargained and actually met all the state minimums.
And so so tiering out and treating someone differently that's terminated or vested, but does their 10 years, is the actuary at the time was saying that we can't afford this until 10 years later?
Well, you didn't have to reach the minimums under 175.351 until you had either you bargained for it or you had chapter money that would pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it just wasn't bargained for until 2005 or 6.
okay.
So
the question is, I mean, the bigger question is, if somebody's here and leaves, and the law changes, and the law advances the date upon which someone could retire, is that intended to apply to people who were already gone prior to that date? And generally with separated vesteds, they are treated, you noted they were treated separately in the actuarial report from Joe. They're really treated as retired, but not yet in pay status. Because if you cut the benefit, which happened in this plan once, right? Didn't it go from 265 down to 2.5?
Mm-hmm.
You can't look back and say, oh, well, guess what? You're gone, I'm cutting your pay. So, I mean, there's a qualitative difference which you have to decide. I mean, you're the judges of the plan. The plan is silent about what happens to changes for separated vested members. The general rule of law is you can't look backwards, you can only look forwards. The last time the Supreme Court of Florida dealt with this was with the Florida retirement system in 2013, when FRS went from non-contributory to contributory. They basically wiped out their COLA, and they took the drop interest rate from 6 to 1 or something like that. But they only did it prospectively. So if you had 15 years in the Florida retirement system, and you needed 25 to retire after, and some of those years were after, if as of 2013 you had 15 years, you needed 10 more, 60% of your benefit ultimately would have gotten the old COLA, 40% of it wouldn't because that accrued after the law change. So, and the Supreme Court said that in Florida, benefits are subject to change until the member is eligible to retire. However, with a separated vested member, they're no longer an employee, they're not even a member anymore. Because when you leave and you stop contributing, you cease to be a member as defined in our plan. You're a vested participant. So if you take the position that the benefit had to improve, then you're also going to be taking the position going forward that part of the pension contract is, I understand if I haven't yet reached the date that I can start getting paid, my accrued benefit can decline. And that's, and you can't have one edge of the sword and not the other, for lack of a better analogy coming to mind. And I don't care how you resolve it. If you want to resolve it that these two people should have been able to retire when they hit 55, then that's your call. But that'll mean that in the future, anybody who leaves the vested interest is going to be subject to reduction. We need to tell people that before they bolt out the door with 10 years.
So what we're saying there is that they left, when you leave before
they're getting
the law
a plan
change.
that was in effect on the day they left. That's generally the rule. There's an older case from the 60s, State ex rel. O'Donnell versus Jacksonville Beach, and I know about it because I read it last night in preparation for our meeting. And what that was about was, really was about the right to name a survivor. And what the case law said is, look, whatever the plan is on the day you leave, that's the plan. You're entitled to. And with the implication being, if it gets better, you don't get it. If it gets worse, you don't get it. But the multiplier now is better than, say, when the plan first started. And we didn't go back and pick up all the retired folks and up their multiplier. By the same token, if there were people who left who had some of their time at 2.65, we didn't go back and cut it either. When it went to 2.5, you didn't recalculate everybody's time. So that's the legal question you have to decide. Is, are you interpreting the plan, because the ordinance was not specific when it changed, when it adopted the essence of 175-211. It didn't say, by the way, this is intended to apply retroactively. Generally, laws are presumed to apply only prospectively unless they say otherwise. The City Commission could have said this will apply to any member with a vested interest. Or they could even, you can't give it to retirees, because there is a statute, 215.425, which now says you can't give somebody a bonus after they've left. And that statute actually goes back to the 1868 Florida Constitution, which was intended to prevent the governor from giving, outgoing governors from giving bonuses to their staff on the way out the door. It got carried forward when the 1968 Constitution was adopted, and then it turned into a statute which has been amended. Municipalities used to be not covered by it, now they are, or at least have been for the last 10 years, I think. So that's the real legal question you have to decide. Is our vested separated members entitled to get things that improve? And if they are, then they have to be subject to the detriment.
So just for clarity, these members separated after 97.
These members separated after 97.
So the ordinance trumps the statute.
The ordinance in this case trumps the statute because unless we could see that there was chapter money that was not being used to provide that improvement, and it was used for something else.
And if you recall, the original base year of 97 established a certain level of benefits that cost a certain amount, and that was the base amount until it was changed in 2005. And everything above that base amount, you know, as it shows here, was reserved for share plan.
Right. Just like it was in 97.
Yeah.
Okay, so the,
So the ordinance said 60 or 65 when they, do we know what the
Yeah.
ordinance said?
That's a good.
yeah, I can tell you with the
It
2002.
was never, I don't think it was ever 65.
No, it might have been the general plan, and it may still be. That's why I was saying, when people call and get confused when they call risk management. So this is the 2002 vow where they list that they're,
If it's our valuation, it should have a plan summary in it. What does it say?
yeah.
Normal retirement age is 65.
No. Normal retirement age is 55 with at least 10 years credited service. Or age 20, but then under a different provision, or under, it says terminated benefit. The monthly accrued benefit is payable at age 60. So we were reporting that we were treating the terminated members differently, and the state didn't catch it. My assumption is that when we cleaned up everything in 05, 06 bargaining, and those
Yeah,
7
all
corners
sins were forgiven.
well, I don't know, who said, hey, you can't do this. This doesn't make sense. Actuary, the attorney, or the state might have finally said it. I just know the money was there. There were several ordinance changes in between these members leaving, so there was a reasonable time for them to treat them like they were supposed to, according to the statute. But yeah, I can't prove. I did ask Joe Griffin if he thought that allocating them separately would be a big cost, and he said no, but
There's probably no cost for 2 people.
right.
No measurable cost.
Right. So with the basis of where the share plan went to, I honestly don't know how that share plan, obviously it went to the new amount coming in for that year, that we ended up at the base level.
When was the share plan created?
Well, it wasn't created until 2012 for police and 2017 for fire. But through the bargaining process, the city agreed to hold, all the excess money in reserve for the share plan until it was established, even though it had not been established.
When did the city agree to start doing that?
In 1997.
Or yeah,
So it was held in contemplation would be used for the share.
Right.
And not for additional defined benefits.
correct.
See, I think that's the difference. And I think that's what would have separated it. I mean, I think, I don't vote here, so I try not to tell you what to do unless it's flat out illegal. But I think the better reading of the rights of a terminated vested member is that whatever the plan is in the day you leave, that was your expectation. I left with the expectation that this is going to be my benefit. And then to say, well, something else happened, I'm not sure I don't think you can't claim that there's a breach of contract, because the contract was the terms of the plan. And if you didn't work between the day you left, if you provided no further service, there's no consideration for the contract. So, there were cases where there was a Fort Lauderdale case where a bunch of cops dropped during negotiations because they were afraid the drop plan was going to get worse instead of better. So they raced into the drop at the last minute, even though the union told them, don't do that. We're going to get a deal. And they did it anyway. And then the union got a deal, and it was considerably better. And they sued, claiming age discrimination, and because they were over 40. And the court ultimately held And they asked them, why did you leave when you did? And they said, we left because we thought it was a good deal and we didn't want to lose, that it might have gotten worse. And the court said, well, you pays your money and you takes your chances. And there was a similar case in Miami, where people left because of their fears of what financial urgency would do to them. And actually it ended up getting better after they left, but they wanted to do over. I don't think you count that. I mean, if you're asking what I think the better legal view would be, it is that age 60 would be the age. Now, I don't know why did we not notify these people when they hit 60?
So
That we should have done.
can I ask, so is your opinion that they should have been eligible maybe at 55 rather than 60? Or that they were given bad information that they were not eligible until 65, and so they're due some retroactive benefit to their 60th date of birth?
My position is that our ordinance was not in accordance with the minimum statutes for a decade.
But it didn't have to be.
If you were reserving the chapter money for an agreed upon future purpose of taking it as a defined contribution benefit, a share plan, as opposed to additional defined benefits. And actually since the last few years, you have to have a share plan now. Whether you fund it or not, it's another story.
And that's why the fire right now has one.
Yeah.
Right. And that as long as the money got to the intended beneficiaries, which it did, I guess you could say, well, there are people who left and never got a share.
We paid the people who retired between 97 and 2012 for police, they got their share.
Did fire?
Yes,
Fire
we did
has,
fire.
They got a share.
Because that's how we designed the share plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
these individuals got a piece of the action.
If they were eligible.
Yes, they did.
To be, okay. Yeah.
So if they got a share, then they got the value of the chapter money. And the statute has always said you can use it to create additional defined benefits, or you can do something else with it. And I guess the group think was to do a defined contribution sidecar to the plan, which was the share. So now, if they were eligible at 60, I think we did have some obligation to say, hey, you're 60, you're eligible. If we didn't track them, and they didn't find out till age 65, I think there's a reasonable basis.
No, none of them went out that far. The 65 was just an example of the confusion that occurs.
Did they show up? Did they show up at 60?
So in these individual cases, the one showed up at 60, like he was told, and he ended up filing for his benefit then, and it was his birthday month after his birthday or whatever, and he was explained, well, this takes a month or two to kick in, and they told him, you were not going to get, you should have came a month or two ago.
Well, we ought to fill in that hole, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the other member called at 60, or yes, while she was 60, got a little bit of runaround on the phone a couple times. I think she was 10 months into 60 when she called, when I ended up getting a hold of her and telling her.
Anybody who was 60, we should pay them as of the first day of the month following their attainment of age 60.
Okay.
I think
I'm sorry?
If the board wants to do that, you need to make that motion.
Right. So
Well, we ought to have some tickler in people's, how those computer calendar things show up annoyingly every 20 minutes?
So
everybody's file ought to have something that if they're
So
separate
I don't
invested, it picks up at 50.
Yeah, Steve's not here to speak of, I know there's his argument is you can't get the benefit until you file for it, and I agree with him, that makes sense. But we don't adjust, so if someone is stuck out of the country for a year and they can't get over here, and they come back at, which is now 55, or when they left, the ordinance read 55, we wouldn't adjust their their monthly benefit, like Social Security does, to say, well, you left it in here for a year, we've made X dollars on it, you know what I mean? Like, they're gonna get whatever it was. So to me, that's their money that we've just had the benefit of getting interest on.
Right. The
Or
plan currently says that for members making application on or after May 1, 2016, such monthly pension payment will begin on the first day of the month after the member applies for retirement with the plan administrator. So, and it says, but not less than 30 days after making. So the plan contemplates a 1-month delay. So, but if these people were gone before that provision was in there, we should just pay them as of the date they turn 60 and call it a day. I would also ask them to sign a release that any other claim is abandoned. That's a fair result for doing that. You always have the right to compromise a potential claim under the general body of law called a restatement of trusts, which Florida adopts. And that's the way I would do it. So if somebody was 10 months past 60, write them a check for 10 months worth of payments and be done. And they should say, I accept this and I waive any other claim against the plan.
As far as they should have notified.
I think we really should be notifying people.
I think in an ideal world, there would be some sort, I mean, you may not be able to get a hold of them because they left 15 years ago.
I'm more worried that we have people who are approaching age 72 and we have contributions on deposit. They may have just wandered off and never collected the money. We have a tax obligation to
What
find
happens
them
at
and pay
72?
them. I'm sorry?
What happens at 72?
At 72, you have to take what's called a required minimum
Yeah,
distribution. I know it's rapidly approaching for me.
It's not fun. I can tell you.
No, I'll turn 70 in December, but you have to start taking your pension. If we can't find someone after a diligent search, we have the ability to open an IRA for them. We have their social security numbers. We open an IRA, stick the money in, we've made a distribution, and now we're off the hook. And if they never claim the IRA, it's not my problem.
The good news is their granddaughter or great-granddaughter,
Somebody will find it.
they'll see something on the paper and
The
say,
reason I took a break
"Look
is
at that."
my daughter, Anna, who you've met, was calling me. She's at the Miami Police Share Plan meeting and they've got some people they can't find. And she said, what are we supposed to, what should we do? I said, well, first find out how old they are. And if they're coming up on 72, then that's what we're gonna have to do is open an IRA and send them money.
But Eugene, my point about, Steve says they should have notified me. If the city's acting as the administrator, instead of having our own independent administrator, well, that would be their job, because that's what an administrator does.
Yeah, I believe a valid attempt would need to be made to contact the employees.
Well, obviously you learn from the past. And certainly everyone we should have within everybody's file a cell phone number, and an email address, a private one, and the name of an emergency contact of some kind with that person's cell phone number and email address, so that as they're within, say, 3 months of reaching age 60 for a separated vested member, we send them an email and say, you're coming up on your birthday, or now I guess it's 50, they could go at 50, with an early retirement at 55 at full retirement, and say, as they're coming up to 50, if they've worked here 10 years and departed the workplace, and you send them an email and say, you're gonna be 50 soon, here's your options. And if they don't come in for a while, then you have a clear conscience and there'd be no suggestion of a retroactivity on the pay.
So, Bob, should that be encoded in the ordinance?
I'd like to. Actually...
And if it is, does it have to be bargained with the city then?
I think you have the obligation already to pay at the age that's in 2-600BE, which is the terminated vested section. I think we can adopt a procedure as a board. The board has the authority under 175 and 185 and probably under this plan to make rules. It says the board, after consulting with the advisory committee, whoever that, we don't have one, do
We can form one.
we? What?
We can form one.
May promulgate by resolution written rules and regulations not in conflict with the division. So I think that you have the ability to make a policy or rule, and because the code says separated vesteds can get paid at the early retirement rate at 50 or the full at the unreduced rate at 55, then we ought to have a rule that says each separated vested member shall be notified in writing, or, including electronic mail, at least 3 months ahead of the birthday.
Does someone send out, are you still reading letters?
Well, we do that with our retirees, don't
Yeah,
we?
once they're getting a benefit, they do, because
Yeah,
they want to cancel it if you're dead.
Yeah, right, so that they know where you are. Generally.
What
Well,
kind
for
of
separated,
implications does that make?
for
for you all
separated
logistically?
vesteds,
It's all risk management, and we're not involved in any of
So
that.
I get one
Right.
every year.
but I think you could promulgate a policy and say to risk management, if you're performing this function here, do this. That's within your authority to do. And if you want, I'll write a rule out, send it for your consideration at the November meeting.
Probably be good to get Steve's
In the
input, too,
meantime,
since it's gonna be a shock.
And I think the fair thing to do, the right thing to do with these two affected members is pay them retroactive to first day of the month after they hit 60.
If there's any question at all about,
Provided they release all claims. Known and unknown. And I'll prepare a little form for that too. So you got somebody getting a 10-month bonus check. And how long did the other one go out before?
I said a few months maybe,
Okay.
before it kicked in.
It's free money. And they didn't have to get a lawyer, and they didn't have to, because I think they probably have a statute of limitations problem anyway, on a claim. But I also believe the board, in the exercise of its fiduciary duty, should interpret the plan in favor of coverage. And in this particular case, coverage would be paid under 60.
goodwill.
All right, so I move that separated vested members Danny McElroy and Cheryl Taylor receive their annuity pension checks
Effective on the first day of the month
following
following
the
attainment of age 60.
attainment of age 60, provided they fill in the
Release
blank.
any potential claims.
Release any potential claims.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been seconded. It's already been under discussion. Is there any other discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes.
Bob, what would be the best way to convey that to risk management? Would that be a letter?
You mean about this particular motion? Then as soon as you draft the minutes, is what the board approved.
Okay.
Please do that.
And then, yes,
And
Bob,
I'll
would you
prepare the
please work
release.
on
Yeah, I'll prepare the release, because
a release
pay them, I want them to sign it.
and a rule, a possible rule that you think would,
You will have a notification rule. And I'm also going to include in it about notification with regard to the age 72 issue as well.
That's an interesting thought, yeah.
The law says after 5 years, you can just write them a check if you don't know who they are. If they're not vested, you're supposed to just write them a check and send them their money. That's what our ordinance code says, but I'll bet you we have people that we lost track of. I find it's more common in non-public safety service. I see it more in general plans, particularly if there's a less educated member may serve for, they might have worked there for 6 months and said, you know what, this job ain't for me, and then they leave, and they don't think to collect their pension money, and we do have a duty to do something with it.
all right. The next item on the agenda is the budget.
So this is, as Bob mentioned before, the State Division of Retirement. They actually state that the board is supposed to prepare the budget and submit it to the city as the sponsor for approval. we sort of do it the other way around, just because the city budget department, they have the ability to generate the budget through their process, but we bring it to the board to make sure you agree with it. If you do, ask for you to make a motion to approve it.
So 30% of your salary goes here?
I mean, I would say that the fact that less than one whole full-time position is charged to the pension is pretty good.
It's not bad, yeah, I agree. I'll move approval. Budget.
How much do we increase?
We didn't provide last year's, but I don't think we're increasing really much at all. The only increases were in the investment performance analysis. And again, the budget is really, you're going to pay what invoices you get. So it's not like we necessarily expect to spend $450,000 on investment performance analysis. That was just sort of like an automatic increase that the budget department does.
16,000 for travel and training, for example. I'm sure.
Yeah, we never spend that much.
No.
There was a motion to accept the budget as proposed.
I'll second.
Second. Under discussion.
I'll do my best to charge for that.
So the biggest change you think was performance analysis?
When you go one of the
I think so.
springtime conferences in the Bermuda, they come up.
Exactly.
All right. All in favor of the proposed budget?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes.
Thank you very much.
We now have the opportunity for public comment. Seeing none and hearing none. Next meeting is November 16th, this place, 9 a.m. Motion to adjourn is in order.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the meeting is adjourned.